And tell you a story about a person who doesn't gamble, doesn't make bets in general, and especially doesn't make bets on things that she has no evidence on one way or another. Now this is a story about me and how I not only lost a bet, but then had to follow through with my wager of 2 plane tickets to Vegas. So early on in my relationship with my partner, we had this running banter about a chandelier. He, in great detail, too much detail for my taste, told me about this chandelier being in one of the South Side cabins at Camp Menasca. I believe that if someone is taking the time to intricately describe something as ridiculous as a thrifted chandelier in a place with no electricity, they're probably lying. So I very confidently told him many times over many months that this was not possible. The cabins don't have electricity. And he replied that he had installed its own light switch too. So I responded that I had been to Camp Menasca many times. I have lived for many years with several different people who have worked at Camp Menasca, and no one has ever mentioned this chandelier that you talk about. There is not a chandelier in Waldorf at Camp Menasca. So we bet on it. I bet 2 plane tickets to Las Vegas that there was not a chandelier in Waldorf. And he said, great, I'll match you your bet of 2 plane tickets to Vegas that there is a chandelier. So you might remember that this is a story about a person who lost her bet and had to fork up those 2 plane tickets to Vegas because there is a chandelier hanging from the rafters of Waldorf. And there's also a light switch connected to the chandelier hanging from the rafters in Waldorf, but it doesn't actually work. So I'm a little worried that you might now have a few preconceptions of who I am as a person. So I just want to be clear that I did have 2 vouchers for these plane tickets from a canceled spring break trip of 2020. And we went to Vegas to hike to a hot springs and eat sushi, because that's the kind of people that we are. Now, what I love about this story, aside from its comical effect, is that it highlights 2 very human characteristics I am both proud of and ashamed of at times. In the first part of this story, I am very confident that I am right. I stand my ground. I provide rationale for why I know that I am right. I am so confident of myself. And it showed because I wagered those 2 plane tickets, and I never make bets, and I never will again. But this second part of the story that I haven't told you about yet is that while I may have been okay with paying for these 2 plane tickets to get us to Vegas, because I'd already paid for them and was going to lose the money unless we used them, I would also always jokingly say that since I was buying the plane tickets, he was going to pay for everything else once we got there. The week leading up to our trip, however, it was clarified that we would be splitting all of the costs in Vegas, but not the plane tickets, because I bet those, and I lost that bet. So let me tell you that there were tears streaming down my face as I sobbed out, "You mean you're going to make me follow through on this bet?" It's not one of my finer moments, but it's a very human and raw moment. I was sobbing over a very minimal amount of money because what I was actually sobbing about was being very much embarrassed that I not only lost this ridiculous bet, but that I was originally so confident that I was right. So I was not only a loser, but I was also wrong. Today's scripture story is about a powerful and divine man who was also so very confident and also wrong. And that's why I really love this biblical story, because it shows us some flaws about a man who we assume didn't have any flaws. And it's also about a feisty Syrophoenician woman who embodies a confident courage in the most vulnerable ways of her time and pushes for the truth to be heard. She is so bold while also staying kind, but doesn't stray from ensuring that the truth is not only told, but it is also understood. I would love to be more like this woman, to be confident and brave and right. But unfortunately, I'm more like Jesus in this story, which normally would be a good thing in most of the stories about Jesus, but maybe not this one. Because Jesus is a little cringy in this story, and this story can be difficult to grasp because of it. So we want to make excuses for him, and there are a lot of things going on here. Let's look at what's going on around the story. Jesus has been spending a lot of time in and around Jerusalem. Prior to these verses and this story, he fed over 5,000 people, he walked on water, and he debated tradition with some Pharisees. And after doing all of these things, he leaves Jerusalem, finds a place around Tyre, and does not want anyone to know where he is, presuming that he just needs a little space. I mean, I do love a good Sunday afternoon nap, but I can only begin to imagine just how tired Jesus must have been and how much he was probably looking forward to a little downtime. So yeah, I can believe that Jesus was tired in this story, but I also believe that there is more going on here. This is a time when readers see Jesus with a bias towards a group of people, towards the Gentiles. And the Gentiles were seen as unclean people because they did not live in the land of Moses' people and follow the laws that Moses taught. They were people you do not mix with if you were considered an insider. But what we as readers know and believe today is that Jesus came for all people. And this bold woman, she tells him that. She knows that she's an outsider, and she agrees with him on that. But she also enlightens him and says that there is enough of him to go around for all people. I like to believe that she doesn't hesitate with this response. And she doesn't apologize for this response. She sets Jesus right. Jesus' response to her that he was not sent to help her and her family is harsh. It's especially harsh when it comes from a divine being. I used to always believe that the church was a safe and holy place, that everyone from church would be welcoming and people would be kind to one another all of the time, no matter what. And then I became an adult and realized that church people are also human. They make human decisions. They have human responses. And they are grumpy and do things that all humans do, even the holy ones. In this interaction with Jesus and the Syrophoenician woman, we see this human response from Jesus. And this is not just a story about Jesus showing us his human response. It's a story about Jesus enlightening us to our own humanness. We see in this story our own tendencies to shut away God's message from certain groups of people. We see in this story our own resistance to go against the cultural norms of our time and follow what the world tells us to do, rather than what God has called us to do. We see in this story just how easy it is to be human. Jesus is having an off day. It happens. It can be cringy, but it does happen more often than I think we'd like to admit. He resists helping this outsider because it's what the world taught him to be right. This story is a wonderful teaching from Jesus. Because in this story, Jesus, the fully divine and fully human person, is the one to have his eyes and ears opened by an unclean woman. This is a teaching for every person sitting here in this room and watching on Zoom. It's for any person who will ever hold a type of leadership position, and it's for every person who wants to have healthy personal relationships. Jesus shows us an example of what it means to be wrong and what it could look like to grow into our own humanness. And this courageous woman is the one who steps forward and reminds him that his table is big enough for her. She reminds him that if he truly is divine, he could never be content with anyone going hungry. The Syrophoenician woman in this story is one to be remembered. I believe that she did this bold confrontation because she loved her daughter so much and wanted to do anything to help her. But she also needs to be remembered for more than that, because she's a mother that went out on a limb for all of us. She went out and corrected someone considered to be of higher standing than her in every possible way. She is one of the many women, in my opinion, who helped to raise and educate Jesus. She deconstructed Jesus' human biases and enlarged his table for all of us to join, because she told the truth in a very difficult situation. Now, my hope with this biblical story and the ways that we can embody it today is that we learn from Jesus what it means to be wrong and grow. And that we also learn from this woman what it means to take a deep breath and tell the truth, even when everything may be against us. I hate being wrong because it's embarrassing. I'm 31 years old, and I still get this big lump in my throat when I have to say I'm sorry because I was wrong. I also know I'm going to continue to be wrong many times moving forward. So I've started practicing being wrong. I've started practicing apologizing and in my head and saying things like, I'm sorry, help me figure out how I can do this better next time, so maybe I don't sob my way through it next time. Unfortunately, we don't often have many examples from people about what it looks like to admit when we're wrong. And the one thing I wish that was also included in this story is an authentic apology from Jesus. But he doesn't give that. He hides behind healing her daughter, something I'm sure she very much appreciated. But I like to imagine this story would be different if in the end Jesus said, "You're right. Your daughter is healed. Thank you for helping me to see my own humanness. I'm sorry I tried to shut out God's love for you." I wonder just how different the world would be if that was included in this text. I wonder how often Jesus thought about this moment moving forward in his ministry, because I believed it changed him and it changed his ministry. He grew, and so we also get to grow from this story too. We get to learn from these two people what it looks like to be strong and what it looks like to be wrong. And I hope that we take this learning and add our own apologies too.